So good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to our esteemed guest, guest lecturer for this afternoon. Uh, Today we are going to talk about our session is based on the export market case study course. It's a level 3 course at the University of the West Indies. And this is actually the second to last course in the semester. Next week is the final class before the students, they go off to exams. I'm not getting my slides to move. Oh, yeah, here we go. So we are privileged to have with us Mr. Rajiv Diptee. Now, Mr. Diptee is well known. He is an entrepreneur, he is a mentor, he's an advocate. He wears many, many hats. And he's also, if you don't know, a past student of the Department of Agricultural Economics and Extension. And before we proceed, class, I would like to not just warmly welcome Mr. Diptee, but also to give you a little bit of insights about his expertise, his experience. He is well experienced, well educated, and he is more than fitting to be able to discuss the topic today. So Mr. Rajiv Diptee is an accomplished businessman, advocate, and philanthropist, and is well established in the national sphere of Trinidad and Tobago. In addition, he is the immediate past president of the Supermarket Association of Trinidad and Tobago, having held the post for the period 2018 to 2024. And I'm sure that you all would see him in the news and in television and so on during his 6-year tenure. During that time, he has made immense strides at the helm, making it into one of the most recognized lobby groups and altruistic organizations in Trinidad and Tobago. He's a personal advocate for social and humanitarian efforts, having lobbied for significant improvements in the social and industrial fabric of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, he remains a foremost consultant to the industry and continues to sit on various institutional committees in an advisory role. Now, we are more than privileged to have this person of this caliber to come join us here this afternoon, to speak with us, to share his insights, because we want to find out more, not just what the textbooks is showing us and what is existing on the online space, but what you are facing. What is your experience? What are you seeing on the ground? And he's going to share a little bit on what's the benefits of exporting? What are some of the ins and outs and some of the organizations that are involved in export logistics and getting you export ready? And also, he also has a little treat for you in terms of talking about some of the workplace and industry trends. And guys, before we welcome him, please, this is a discussion. We are so privileged to have him here. Please ask your questions, okay? Feel free to raise your hand, open your mic, and ask, because he is going to share as much as he can within the very limited time that we have. So without further ado, over to you, Mr. Diptee, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Dr. Baho, and I really want to say thank you to both yourself and the faculty for facilitating this session with your students. I see that it's a very small class today, so I really want to encourage what your lecturer suggested, which is discussion. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and make this as interactive as possible, because I'm not doing a presentation. This will be a discussion geared around the subject content today, which is the exporting, benefits of exporting, and export logistics. And I'm sure many of you have lots of questions. Now, the truth is that when you think about exporting, what does that mean? It means that you define a product at the domestic level that is very carefully delineated, and you want to take that to the international market, because the marketplace here is very small. It's 1.5 million people, and typically the products that you will be gearing are they're typically niche market in the sense that you will be facilitating a certain audience. And as we go through the lecture today, we'll be talking a little bit about some specific examples, some success stories, some challenges to exporters, and what some of those are, and some of the things you should keep in mind if you really want to launch a product, and how to be successful at it. The exporting is something that comes with a lot of caveats. Yes, there's a lot of benefits to it, but the first place that people should start is, what is the product I'm creating? I always emphasize to a lot of people that I come into contact with who themselves are potential exporters, that the need to define what it is that you're creating, who you're creating it for, understanding the marketplace is extremely important. I call this the homework. Before you even start, you have to do the homework. Typically, this will be understanding market trends, understanding what those issues are, understanding what it takes to become an expert in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, at the very base levels, you have to register a business entity, you have to obtain certain licenses and permits. Some of these come from the Ministry of Trade. There are certain forms that need to be filled out. Customs brokers need to be appointed. And this is what we call the statutory regulatory environment that you need to familiarize yourself with, because there are procedures for exports, there's certain documentations, there's certain clearances. And on top of all of that, you need to identify who your target markets are when you're exporting, and begin to establish relationship with those buyers. The thing about it now is that we just came out of COVID. A lot of people were looking for opportunities to really see how they could raise revenues, or at least profits and sales, typically how you look at it. And the thing about it is that you would have seen that there were certain challenges, and those persist up to today. One of the biggest challenges is foreign exchange. Now, I mean, one of the things that people look at when you talk about the export market is your ability to earn foreign exchange. But there's also a lot in that. You need capital to fund some of these startups. When it comes to starting your capitalizing your operations, because you're going to need foreign exchange. More than likely, some of the inputs for production are going to be not be able to be sourced locally. And we could look at some of those things. When we look at the manufacturing sector in Trinidad and Tobago, and if we look at the exporting framework in Trinidad and Tobago, we have, it's primarily hydrocarbon based, yes. Some of our biggest exports are petrochemicals, LNG, ammonia, so forth. There's a thriving food and beverage sector that relies heavily on imports for inputs of production. And you'd see that in terms of food and bev, particularly beverages that we produce here. You could think of companies like Vemco, Nestle, SM Jalil, to name a few that are really big players in the beverage market. Just to look at some of the finer artisan exporters, House of Angostura, that does bitters. But then what we're talking about here is really for you guys who want to be cottage industry exporters. And that's very important, because you all have to understand that one of the benefits of exporting is the economies of scale that you tend to benefit from. And that is something where you have to understand that that there are some key requirements that you have to fulfill. I'm seeing a question in the chat, right? So I just want to deal with it as we go along.
Yeah, so Jadel has a question. He's asking about the documentation that is needed. In theory, they have an idea, but in practice, how linear or complicated it is really to actually obtain these documents?
So there's a consolidated list of licensable exports and imports. A lot of this is regulated at the level of the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Some of these forms are available online. What you need to understand is that the exporting climate is changing a little bit. So I think you all may have seen the launch recently of the Special Economic Zones area, the SEZA. That's a fairly new entity under the auspices of the government. Ministry of Trade and Industry, definitely for some of the customs forms, customs and excise, because there are some clearances and declarations, and and on top of that too, there are declarations that need to be made about the quality of your product, if it's local, if it have foreign things in it. There's also and in some cases there's a bunch of brokers, domestic and foreign, that you will have to be engaged, right? So to answer your question very simply, you should start by looking on the Ministry of Trade and Industry website. A lot of the starting points for the declarations, the customs forms, some of those things are available there to start. And there are facilitators of this conversation. Some of them are Export-TT. Some of them are actually institutions like Kariri. So I recently had the opportunity to work with Kariri on a program last year. I just given you an example of how this because a lot of people frankly don't know what to do when it comes to the export market. So they did a form of the business incubator where they would take export ready people who are desirous of getting into the export market, assessing their products, trying to put it through quality integrity tests and holistical testing and market testing and that kind of thing. And the thing is, a lot of people are just not up to the levels of market readiness. So from the business incubator side, you have to also make sure that that you have the capital in place, because people need to understand that production, there are issues with production. A lot of people have a good product, they can't access the financing that is required for some of these startups, and they don't understand the business that goes into it. And it's something that you have to really understand what your market is, particularly when we're talking about who you're targeting, right? So when it comes to the export licensing and documentation, you apply for an export license from the Ministry of Trade and Industry. You would prepare for them some of the necessary documentation, like the commercial invoices, the packing lists. There are separate bills that come with that. And when you're exporting, you have to ensure standards are met. Standards are maybe something that you're not too familiar with, but when you get into the business of import-export, standards are one of the biggest things. For example, if you're exporting to a foreign market, they will have standards for compliance with things like product labeling, packaging, safety standards, and those are going to be different. Those are going to be different from, they might be very similar to our country, but in most cases, some of those products are tweaked. A nice example of this is perhaps when you go to the airport, you might see a juice or water beverage that might be produced locally, but it looks different. And that's because it's been prepared for export markets. So that's something to keep in mind when you think about standardization. As I said, there is also things like financing and insurance. You will have to secure export financing options. You will have to consider foreign exchange management, because there's going to be some of that. If you are exporting, you will have to establish credit relationships with some of those buyers that you have in foreign territories. And there's going to be a certain level of management when it comes to market research and logistics. So you'll also have to arrange shipping, logistics, and distributions to those territories. And that's something that you can be guided by Export-TT and institutions like Kariri. But the Ministry of Trade and Industry is making a very targeted trust when it comes to streamlining export markets, given the foreign exchange crisis in Trinidad and Tobago, which I'm sure you are all aware. An export market trust is something that's happening right now. So it's actually a good time. It's also a very difficult time because, while a lot of people have good ideas, you also need foreign exchange to get started. So it's a bit, you have to navigate some of these steps when it comes to really kind of understanding the legal and regulatory framework, exporting, financing, and risk management. And that's certainly something that you need to look at. Now, the thing is that and I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right? You've had some success stories with production in Trinidad and Tobago. And when you look at let's look at SM Jalil. I like this story because it's relatable to some of you. When they came out in the with Chubby in Trinidad and Tobago, that was born here. That's something that was created for children, and it became so popular now in Trinidad and Tobago. But there was a worldwide demand for some of these things, and that is a typical innovation of how some of these products can be moved into different markets, and that's something that you have to really identify your target markets. You also have to identify what some of your strategic and competitive advantages are when it comes to lowering the cost of your production and identifying some of these things. I want to open it up to you all because I feel like I'm going very generally. Does anybody have any specific questions that we could maybe start a thread of engagement with?
So I would start with Kai. Kai, you can ask your question one time and then we'll just go down the list.
Sure, please. I think that would be very helpful in kind of lasering the conversation.
Yeah, they prepared questions for you.
Excellent, please.
So go ahead, Kai, you are up first. Kai? Okay. I'll move on to Dejan. Kai, we'll come back to you. You're hearing us, right? Okay, great.
Yes, I'm hearing.
Okay, so
Your audio is breaking up.
Okay, Dejan, if you're hearing us, we are having some audio.
Mention with the. Are you hearing me better now?
Yes, yes. Yeah, go ahead. You can restart. Yes.
Okay. You hear me now, miss?
Yes, we can hear you better now. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So with regards to the documentation, I know that Jadal asked a question. In particular, what is the time frame that it usually lasts for these documentation to be obtained?
Right. So the thing about it is that there have been several complaints over the years, and I'm not going to that in fact some of these processes are very opaque in terms of how the ministry officials tend to treat with some of it, because there's determinations to be made by customs, there's determinations to be made by when it comes to obtaining your export licenses, when it comes to ensuring that your documentation is above board for quality and safety in particular. These processes, what generally is encouraged is that you, while you're developing your product, or when you have a sample of your product, that you apply for your export licenses in a parallel step-by-step process, so that you could you can facilitate. It becomes more of a facilitated dialogue with export officials. It would be if you find that that at any point in time that you're not getting where you would like to be, you could recruit the services of a broker to treat with export officials. But this is also why I encourage people to approach Export TT, who has a formal program in place to assist people, being the primary arm of the Ministry of Trade for export purposes and facilitating export readiness. So that's something that's their mandate. Timeframes do tend to vary, and that could be for a number of reasons. That they have questions about the composition of your product, the legality of your product, the integrity of your product. Is it within certain efficacy standards when it comes to safety, packaging, product quality, product labeling? There are a number of things, of conditions and criterions that you have to satisfy. So if you could satisfy all those things up front, then your time frame could be it could be a few weeks, or it could be longer, or it could be shorter. That is entirely up to how well prepared you are as the business, the entity that is approaching them for export. But I think that if you engage third parties like Export TT, you can facilitate a higher level of market readiness, export readiness, when it comes to getting your product out.
So just to continue on that point, Mr. Diptee, the legal aspect in terms of, business registration, you have a lot of businesses who are operating in the informal economy, and then there's this whole trust right now where they're trying to move towards this fully online system, and to get persons with the cross IDs and all of that. Is that something that they must have? Like, they must have their business registration before they could even consider approaching Export TT?
Absolutely. I think so I wouldn't say so let me say absolutely yes and no. Absolutely, from the point of view that it is a requirement for registration and to get your permits and licenses in place. I also would say that no, because if you go to Export TT and they have they have several programs for the level of gestation you are at. It's something that they help you to get ready and help you facilitate your process. It's assumed that when you're doing this, you're not doing it as an individual. You do need to get registered as a company. You do need to get a taxpayer identification number, your TIN number. You do need to facilitate those statutory requirements. So it is something that, and particularly where the company's registry online system comes into play, what we've seen is that there have been teething problems. I think that they've extended the amnesty recently for companies that have fallen afoul of some of the requirements when it comes to companies registry. So I think that deadline has actually carried on into this month or next month.
It's January 31st. I saw today.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there's reasons for that, because not only are there challenges at the level of cross and the system, what we've seen with some of these digitization efforts is that there's still a paper requirement. So even though it's gone digital, it's still being processed manually because some of the arms of the government have not been digitized. They've been digitized in silo. So there are still a lot of challenges for registrations to be completed, and there's been a lot of issues with getting some new companies registered now because of the penalties that I think that the Ministry of Finance is alluding to, where the activity of some of these companies have been called into question. So I would suggest to people, you have to do your homework, because when you go to register a company, you have to ensure that you get the approval for the name, you could state what the purpose of the company is, these kinds of things. And it's very important just to have a fully baked idea of what it is you want to do. But certainly, yes, you need to be registered, you need to have your TIN number, you do need to have these things taken care of.
What if you're an nascent entrepreneur? So you're now learning, maybe you're a student, you are inquisitive, you're curious, you want to learn about exporting, but you haven't thought about your business, or you haven't ideas yet, but you still want to learn about the process. Would Export TT facilitate? They have any like sessions, information, classes, or anything for upcoming?
So we what I did as during my time in the Supermarket Association, you find that some of these institutions like Export TT and Kariri and even Cardi, because you know, they were doing food and drug testing in the absence of chemistry, food and drug having a lab. And I still don't know if they've fully rectified that problem at CFDD. What you tend to see is that they have a lot of workshops and seminars throughout the year. In fact, Kariri just launched the business hatchery, not just, but they did it last year, where people come and test products. They're actually giving you a space to do product testing. I think it's Freeport. And once you register with them, once you let them know what what it is you have an idea of, they tend to hold your hand. And I've seen some exporters take I don't want to be off-putting, but they've taken quite a while to get off the ground. That said, most people test products in the domestic market and then find themselves limited thereby in the domestic commercial space, and they find that the international market might just be something that they want to do. We see that where people have been able to take advantage of you know, spirits, beverages, chocolates, because we have such a fine artisan chocolate market with the fine cocoa that we have here. We've seen people, even from a electronic standpoint, product innovate and export, but really and truly the intra trading between the region and not really the UK, the US, Europe, is heavily focused on I would say the food and bev, it's a downstream market for a lot of things, not necessarily equipment, not necessarily that kind of thing, but it's there's a lot of potential that's not being tapped right now.
Right. And another point that you touched in terms of the capital requirements and the finance being to become ready for exporting. So let's say in the agriculture sector, you might be able to tap into ADB for some sort of loans and financing. There's Netcode. Is there anything specific for export to tap into?
You know, the thing about exports is economies of scale. You need to have, you need to be able to fulfill levels of production. If a buyer puts in an order at a certain quantity of goods to be fulfilled, and you are a cottage setup and you're not able to ramp up production, you're gonna face issues. And if you disappoint first-time buyers on a first-time basis, guess what? They don't come back. So you have to be able to really examine the aspect of before you even take it to market, you have to be able to anticipate demand. You have to anticipate if you could meet the demand and make the investments. And this is why we call business risk, right? Because there are aspects of risk. If I need more capitalization, that might mean I need to ramp up my own financing. And again, I'm going back to some of these institutions. They've brought some of these same companies that you just mentioned, like at the Agricultural Development Bank. JMMB has leaned into that space too. So there have been aspects of financing that have come forward, but it's still something that you need to anticipate. What is the demand for my product? It's certainly something that people need to consider heavily. I mean, I'm just gonna make a reference here because I was reading about it in one of the newspapers. The Trinidadian businessman who is doing the tags with Walmart in the States, the physical tags for lost luggage, and there was a significant amount of financing that he needed, and he's looking for angel investors right now. He's looking for that. I mean, those are bigger projects, but the same fundamentals apply to you in your business. It's just a level of scale. What am I producing? What is it going to cost me to produce? Do I need foreign exchange? Do I, you know, it's a lot of considerations that you need to think about.
Thank you. Jadal, you could go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. So speaking about risk and stuff like that, my question is how important is risk management and insurance in exporting? And can you just give us like an example of what is its role in exporting?
Sure, one second. All right, so that actually is an excellent question because typically even when you're importing, similarly, when you're exporting, you will need to insure your goods. And that is something that is very important. It indemnifies you and covers you in the event of certain circumstances such as loss and damages, etc. And there is a level of cover that is required when it comes to that. It varies. Long story short, it depends on what you're exporting as well. If it's perishable, if it's you know, if it's fragile, that kind of thing, it does vary. So there's quite the long and short is that similar to financing, insurance is an aspect of risk management that needs to take place to be a function of coverage not just for you, coverage for the agent, coverage for yeah, the buyers as well. So yes, and typically this is something you can arrange with your providers and your customs brokers if that's the case. And there are levels of coverage that you can access. So it's not something that's hard and fast, but it really varies, and I don't want to delve into anything too specific, but it is something to consider. If anybody wants to put something forward in terms of an idea, I don't mind discussing it a little bit further to say what could or can't be done. Does anybody here have any ideas about what they would like to get into? So we can maybe consider a practical example.
Yes, I would say home improvement supplies. So, simple everyday household use things like spray paint and these things.
Okay, so even something like spray paint is an aerosol under pressure, right? So that it's still flammable. It's still something that could be considered combustible, depending on freight, and depending on the quantum you are shipping. There's different coverages for containerized transport, for air freight, for that kind of thing, and it's certainly it really depends on the quantities that you are moving when it comes to that. So your insurers will take all these risks into consideration. They will also look at who your shipping agents are. They will consider all of that, and I want to suggest to you all very frankly that there are standards for insurance coverage. Particularly, so it's not really what about your goods alone. It's there are generally levels of coverage that provide not just for you, but against delays, against other aspects of it. So when you consider risk management, I don't want you to think of insurance as your biggest risk, because really and truly the capitalization it comes to the fore more, because when you're ramping up production, if you're ramping up production, for example, you need to be able to secure more market because you will be producing more goods, and you need to ensure that you could be able to move those goods, because then you'll be sitting on inventory, and that's not an ideal situation. So like when you think about all these aspects of risk, don't just think about it in terms of that it's a function of shipping. Think about it like that. And it is entirely possible that that depending on what your final exports look like, that it will meet an industry standard. I hope that helps you, Dejan.
Yes, thank you. I would follow up with another question, more targeted towards the logistics side. As an information technology major, I want to know if there's any system currently that you are aware of that is developed by any, whether it be private or public company, to more manage the logistics for new exporters? So, you're exporting large quantities or even smaller quantities of something to another country. You have trucks moving, you have storage, you could think of it like Amazon
Ministry of
export.
Trade and Industry attempted to do it with the single electronic window. And I say attempted because there's still so many aspects of these things that are still paperized and manual and still
Right.
require so much. And that's the thing, right? Like that's such a great idea that you have. But the thing about it is that when the level of coverage that you're talking about, it needs permissions. And I'm using the words permissions to cover not just permissions, but think of licenses. All the in some instances, some of these statutory requirements require legislation because they're novel, they're new, and everything you're saying makes sense. I'm just going to give you an example of an experience I had during COVID when we were doing vaccinations. We had a really cool digital framework for how we wanted to accelerate, because we wanted to create it was the first time people were desirous of vaccines. There was a high vaccine uptake at the start. So you wanted to develop a system that really prioritized movement of people, as opposed to one person is going to take 10 minutes. So, we would get their paperwork out to the way, and then there would be a production line of vaccination. And the thing about it is that the government, through the Ministry of Health at the time, they were still on a paper-based system, and all vaccination sites were required to adhere to the paper-based system. So I hear you in that some of it, but a lot of what should be done and a lot of what is currently being done is being undertaken by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So just to answer your question, yes, there's the single electronic window. There's the SEZA, the Special Economic Zones Authority, which I think is launching something soon. Customs has had something in the pipeline for a really long time. So the digital trust should be forthcoming, but it is directed by the public sector and not the private sector. And I do feel like it could benefit from a bit of a but that's just not the case right now.
All right, and let me see. I think there's a question in the chat. Let me see. Okay, so Dejan said thank you for that. Now, just to track back just one step
Sure.
behind. So let's just consider that, okay, you did your checks, you did your export readiness checklist, and you figure out that you actually meet the criteria. Why export? What are some of the benefits a Trinidadian business, a Togolese business would derive or benefit from exporting? Sorry.
So, when you talk about the benefits of exporting from Trinidad and Tobago, because that's where we are, and I think we mentioned one of the first benefits at the very start. Trinidad and Tobago is essentially a small island market. It's a small island economy in terms of the number of persons. Just going back to Dejan's example of spray paint, there's only a certain amount of people, number of persons that are going to use spray paint versus traditional paint and other modes of paint. So the thing about it is that you're going to be able to access larger global markets beyond the domestic economy. And that's a crucial point, because it's once you're able to do that, it leaves you with the ability to really not be limited. Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Sorry, I my screen just shifted. It really gives you the ability to access markets that are global in nature, and it allows you to be able to think bigger, to think on a global scale. And I'm sure that's something that a lot of these students, you hear that all the time in university: think global. And
Correct.
that's what the global village really allows you to. You can start, I mean, in today's world, you have the ability to list your product on Amazon. You can list your product. I just gave you guys the example of the guy who's selling his product developed from ideas in Trinidad and Tobago, developed in the UK, and is now selling it in the United States, right? So ideas are powerful. It's a global village. Globalization is a big concept. So you're not just constricted to the trading patterns that we see in Trinidad and Tobago, which is I buy something from a supplier for X and I sell it for Y. You can think about it now. How can I sell to a larger pool of persons? And that's one of the first benefits.
Right.
Now, because of the larger pool of persons, you will benefit from economies of scale and a vastly higher potential for increasing your revenues, because that's something that you won't be limited by your capacity, but then again it's something that you'll have higher earning potential. And that's something where we've seen companies like, for example, SM Jalil, really ramp up their productions, and they've been able to establish factories not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in other Caribbean islands, in other territories. You have to be able to understand, and something we didn't touch on is how foreign trade agreements, of which a lot of people in the industry right now, including myself to an extent, have we try constantly to understand how we're going to benefit from a lot of the trading agreements that we have within CARICOM with our trading partners in the EU, the US, the UK. And what does that mean? What does it mean for labor cost? What does it mean for coming in to sell my product? Are there duties and tariffs? All these things are important to understand when you look at your trading territories, because foreign agreements, of which the Ministry of Trade and Industry is the go-to to understand. If I'm selling something to Jamaica or Guyana or Barbados, remember they have protection mechanisms similar to how, for example, we will establish protectionisms in Trinidad. In Trinidad, we do some manufacturing of pasta products. We do some manufacturing of condiments, and believe that I'm just using an example with pasta here because we have tariff schedules and duties for pasta that is up to maybe about 40–50%. And that's a lot. It's particularly if I'm importing pasta from a cheaper destination that is a lot cheaper, but by the time I pay the duties, it's kind of prohibitive to really take it to market, because that's how trading agreements work. So you need to understand that, in particular with your established target markets. Some more benefits, like Trinidad markets are volatile, even the domestic market. So it's as I said earlier in the conversation, a lot of people are going to start off in the domestic market, particularly if you're a cottage producer, which is a small scale producer is what I mean when I say cottage producer. So you're going to start off there testing your product. It might gain some popularity, but it might inform your patterns to refine your product to take it to export. So you'll be able to diversify your revenue streams. You could sell in the domestic market and the foreign market, which is what a lot of established manufacturers do right now, because some of those same companies we just discussed don't just sell all the major retailers in Trinidad, but they also export to the region. They also repackage for export to the states and other territories. So there are opportunities for diversifying your revenue streams. Finally, you'll find that doing business in other territories allows you the opportunity to expand your knowledge of technology, business practices. Some people tend to forget that they themselves are an export product. If you have ideas in your head and you can carry it somewhere else, you're an export product. I was reading this story of because in this age of social media, vlogging, blogging, all these things have really just become so big now, right? And you have become your own product. And some people take that to the world, So as long as you're constantly, remember, once you're working in export markets, you constantly have to stay on the edge of new technology, new business practices, new ways of doing business. And it's something that will only help you, and not just in the domestic market, but also in the foreign market. And remember, a lot of today's discussion is centered around the idea that you have a product and that you want to export it. Right now, at the very base levels, it's going to mean quite a lot of things when it comes to that. Jardel, sorry, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, one of the questions I want to talk about is like we're talking about exporting as a with products. How possible is it to export with a service? And do you have any examples of like exporting with a service?
That is something that is entirely possible. It's also something that doesn't need an export license from the Ministry of Trade. When it comes to depending on if what you're talking about is a service in the digital domain. I mean, there are services that could be brokerage, for example. Foreign companies come in Trinidad and Tobago, you could sell your services before their products even get here, right? To help them navigate the local market, because the same way that we export goods, people export goods to Trinidad and Tobago, right? So I just giving you an idea of that. Yes, there is the ability to export a service. However, it's something that is still a little bit in a novel space when you consider what it is you're exporting, because is it that we're exporting technologies? Is it that we're exporting capacities? And the thing is really, I've seen a lot more of what you're describing in the petrochemical sector, because there's a higher demand, given that that is a primary export when it comes to LNG and whatnot. I've seen a lot of brokerage services, for example, take off. You know, and talking about that, Rams Logistics might be a good example, because they exported their technical and expert new to Guyana, right? And where they established, obviously they ran into some issues there. And again, it's protectionism when you consider what local content is or was and really, but it's something that you have to consider. What is your service, right? So I hope that helps you. Logistics is the example I used.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, Jadel, and going back on Mr. Diptee's extremely important point, he mentioned that you yourself can, you can be an export product yourself. So when you look at the SME sector and you look at those sole traders, and there are patterns with those who are in the creative sectors. You have contractors, you have those who are doing videography, photography, persons who are doing makeup artists, barbers, and they themselves, they travel all over the world and meet even Trinidadian persons and perform the services there, and then they get external clients from the foreign market, and they build their entire brand, and before you know it, you're hard to get them in Trinidad afterwards.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off Dr. Baho's point as well, Jardel, some of the textbooks you're using, some of the material you've been reading, V.S. Naipaul is something we've exported to the world, and he originated right here in Trinidad. Samuel Selvon, some of the educators have built brands that have gone to some of the other islands. So it's really and truly what is it that I'm exporting. And certainly, I didn't think about it, but hairdressers and barbers, for sure, there are quite a lot of experts right now flourishing in the industry that are sought out for some of their services abroad. So you really have to think about it creatively. Don't be limited by anything that you think you can't do.
That is very important. Now, I know we just have 8 more minutes to go. And before we wrap up, I know that Ridwan, you had an important question that you posed to the class recently about, certain sorts of careers related to anyone who has done agribusiness management, entrepreneurship. Ridwan, if you want, would you like to take the mic and ask Mr. Diptee?
Oh, sure, Miss.
Thanks.
I just would like to know, like after university, right? My degree is agribusiness, so I want to know. I know. After my degree, I will more or less want to start my own business, and then well set myself out there to market my goods and services out there and sell it. But after I will before that now I will need capital. Where can I work like the Ministry of Agriculture? How can what job opportunities is there with my degree to go out there and say I have this degree and I could do certain jobs and I could I could go out there and start myself out there.
Right. It's a really excellent question. So before we move into the realm of mentorship now, because that's that I will share with you my particular perspectives on that question, right? But before we close off the expert side, I just want to say that if I have not answered any of your questions satisfactorily, or you've not been able to field any of your questions, please feel free to forward them to Dr. Bahua, and she will get them to me, and I'll try to get back some answers to you. So let's take your question now, Ridwan. The thing about it is that we're going to talk a little bit about traditional career trajectory, right? Because that's kind of what we're talking about here. You graduate, you're in a turnkey system in education from primary school to high school to university, and there's a lot of expectations at the end of a tertiary role. And I want to use that word because students, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Clearly, you've studied very hard for a 3 or 4 year period. You've absorbed a lot of the literature, and there's a high level of expectation that when I graduate, there's going to be a job market that can satisfy the earning, that will increase my earning potential, that I can secure a satisfactory job position. And it's something that and in most cases, a lot of people just want job security, right? Because there's a lot of uncertainty right now. There's been inflation over the years tied to and independent of COVID. We having a bit of a almost a higher cost of living environment. So there are a lot of things that you're thinking about right now, particularly with respect to when you graduate. Now, the thing about it is that is there a labor shortage in Trinidad and Tobago? I would say people talk about high unemployment, but there is a shortage of skilled and unskilled labor in Trinidad and Tobago. That's for a number of reasons. People, and I just want to use the simplest example. You could drive by some boutique malls, and you'll see a lot of signs saying help wanted, and that could be for menial task or entry level positions, but that also applies to a lot of middle management and upper level management positions as well. Now the truth is that we also talk about the brain drain in Trinidad and Tobago, which is we kind of observing from our side in the industry. I want to say that from the side of the industry, we get a lot of students who graduate. We get a lot of graduates who come into the world of work, and we tend to have a graduate that in many cases, given the peculiarities of the industry and the sector that we operate in, which is fast moving retail and manufacturing, because we deal with a lot of them as well. We have to take that person and almost do retraining to an extent. We've seen it at the level of masters as well with some MBA graduates. And the thing is that I would say that when we do the interview process in particular, we are looking for people who are very well-rounded, because I would say that the way that we assess people now is so much more holistic in terms of what we want from the kind of people, because in our industry in particular, which is retail, we kind of want people who we could shape, we could mold, we could inject new ideas, who could inject new ideas into the profitability of the business or the company. And that's also something that we will be looking for longevity. We're looking for people who will stay with us for not just a short period of time, but a period of years, and that is what we in the private sector are looking for. And sometimes I'll just be honest, people find that the remuneration is not in keeping with maybe with how long they studied, and then and that is really up for debate. What you were asking about is public sector. When you talk about the ministries, now I assume that some of these entities like Ministry of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries would have come to your world of work. Did you guys have one, by the way? Ridwan?
I think it's every second semester, so like next January or the end, they will have a world of work for everyone.
Right, and I think you typically see some of these ministries come to that. Am I correct to say that?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Right. So you'll have your chance to interact with them. What I like to suggest to students is that I know some of you are working maybe to support your education while you're in school. I also think that sessions like this, where you talk to people like me, not me in particular, but people like me, is very useful for you, because it's good for stakeholder interaction at the earliest levels of your education. So that you can try to find out not only from a networking perspective, but also how can I make myself more attractive to my future or prospective employer. Because we want to see more well-shaped individuals, more well-rounded individuals coming into the workplace. And it's a very competitive workplace as well, because quite a lot of people are matriculating with degrees in this time. A lot of people have degrees. I would say to you that several ministries, well, but let's keep the focus on agriculture, seeing as you're agribusiness student. Trinidad and Tobago is in a food security crisis, much like the region. Like one of those committees I sit on is the Food Security and Food Prices Committee, and there are no real short answers to becoming self-sufficient when it comes to feeding ourselves. And there's a number of reasons for that, but because it was just cheaper to import a lot of goods into Trinidad and Tobago, so we kind of neglected those industries. So agribusiness graduates are being favorably looked on, a lot more favorably looked on than when I started the program, because I think the program was very young when I started it, and I think that the Ministry of Agriculture is certainly looking for people like you all to get involved. Kai, I see you have your hand up.
Mic is muted.
Mr. Cummings, can you unmute your mic? I'm just gonna continue until he takes off his hand or unmutes his mic. An important thing to note as well to the class is that your agribusiness program is modeled around very closely to business management. You understand the fundamentals of business management, even though they have a particular focus on agriculture and agricultural economics and that kind of thing. Because I think it's even better than a general degree, because it actually focuses your attention on something that you can apply the knowledge to, which is agribusiness. The thing about it is that so you still get all the fundamentals of a business management education with the program, and it's ideal. So there are employment opportunities in the Ministry of Agriculture, the ADB, several public and private sector organizations, for the same reason I just pointed out, in that you understand all the fundamentals of business management. And more so, once you can demonstrably show this in your capacity as an intern or somebody on probation, that you will have every opportunity. I mean, I would consider hiring some of you if that's the case. But there's a lot to be said with what's on paper, and I just want to go back to the interview, because the interview is where you make the difference. How you present yourself, how you speak, what are some of the extra vocational skills that you might have? Do I have additional certificates? These are things that really kind of tend to pop out. We always looking for young, hungry, motivated, bright people, of which I'm sure all of you are. And that is the future of Trinidad and Tobago in no short or small words. because you guys are what we need to continue to kind of reinvigorate the sector, you know, where when it comes to agribusiness. There's a lot that needs to be worked on in the realm of agriculture. So there, I would certainly say, to answer your question, Ridwan, there are employment opportunities upon graduation, and I think you can definitely take it up at another forum with them. So I hope that answers some of your questions or concerns.
Yeah, so thanks. Much appreciated.
If you have anything further to ask, feel free. I'm here. So please, if you want to ask something else about the workplace, you know, how, feel free. I'm here.
So while we are waiting on that, Mr. Diptee, you mentioned something very important earlier on, the fact that although we may think that there is high unemployment, there actually is a shortage of skilled and unskilled workers. And I find that, I mean, being an entrepreneur myself, sometimes it's very difficult to find that dedicated employee, that person who you can rely on, that person. And I'm joining this out to the class as well. And you being an employer, Mr. Diptee, these students, they are doing an entrepreneurship degree. So we teach them the entrepreneurial mindset. We teach them, you know, the whole thing about grit and creativity and being able to be resourceful. And would you say that somebody who understands that, seeing things from the entrepreneur's eye and getting that entrepreneurship specific training, would you think that it would be favorable in some of those private sector organizations, whether it's services, food, business, whatever, a lot of those medium-sized enterprises that have management positions are looking for people to drive their team and to get things going?
You know, certainly, right? The thing about it is that this program, it provides a framework for the formalization of so many concepts, theories, and the academics that are required to succeed in the real world. It gives you a fundamental foundation for success in the real world. I just want to tell these students that it doesn't really end with your bachelor's. You have to constantly be learning. Even when you come into the workplace for the first time, that workplace is going to have its peculiarities. There's going to be different protocols. There's going to be, you need to be able to adapt. You need to be able to show that you are not a static person, that you are a flexible and adaptive learner. And I would say that there's quite a lot. You know, for me personally, when I'm hiring people, I like to see a diversity of experience. You wouldn't believe I just want to use the example, right? Even when it comes to vocational people, plumbers, electricians, I can't find enough of them, you know.
Yeah.
You know, like so I actually appreciate if one of your side hustles is that it actually puts you in a more favorable light with me. Oh, you could do that too? Great. Well, guess what? You're hired. You know,
But
like
just for a little PR in class, we do have a welder, Dejan. Dejan, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
and that's great because some of these vocations, particularly if you have a certificate to chauffeur to Dejan, it is great. I mean, you know, I think there are a couple of the training institutes do that in terms of the formalization, but it's good to see somebody who can handle that. And we normally like people who are reliable, dependable, and there is a real shortage. I mean, sometimes we are competing with government for persons, and a lot of people who, you know, we've seen a lot of young people for whatever reason just migrate or just altogether start there, you know. It's good. I would tell people, yes, there's a whole world of employment waiting for you out there. If you also want to start your own business, I just want you to understand that you've learned everything when it comes to the entrepreneurial mindset, but the experiences of starting your own business is something you have to have the mental preparation for, particularly when it comes to things that might stress you out. I need to borrow money. I need to ask my family if I could get some assistance, be it in terms of the human resource aspect, or I need to use their property to do a startup or whatever it is, you know. There are sacrifices with running your own business. It's ultimately more rewarding. And I want to emphasize that for those of you that want to start your own business. but you have to understand that there are stresses that come with that, and it's what you are prepared to work for, sacrifice, and ultimately, you'll go far. But there are opportunities in Trinidad and Tobago, definitely, for you all. So it's really about what you're prepared to do, and do not be put off. If you could find yourself applying for several positions on the basis of this degree.
Okay. All right. So we are at around that time. So are there any final questions? I know that Mr. Diptee said if you have anything else, you can always reach out to me. Are there any final questions? No? All right. Well, if there aren't any final questions, first, I would like to say to you personally, thank you so much, because everything that you discuss were things that, we studied, we discussed in class, but you kind of give us that little extra to go with and to also continue, because we have class going on afterwards. After you exit our session, we actually have class. So we are going to now discuss what was discussed in this actual live session. And thank you for also giving us a little mentorship advice. My students did truly appreciate it. However, I'd like to call on Mr. Dejon, who is going to deliver the vote of thanks. Dejon?
Yes, yeah. Okay, so Mr. Diptee, on the behalf of my classmates and myself, we would like to just extend our appreciation and gratitude for, this diverse amount of information that you provided to us today. And well, I know and I trust that we will not only use this information for our upcoming examinations, but even as some of us in the class are young entrepreneurs, we would take this information, document it, and be able to, regurgitate it and use it for future purposes. I want to also say, well, I did have little research on you actually. That's the person I am. I like to do research on entrepreneurs and so forth, locally, internationally. And so, well, I want to commend you for your contribution to our country, and I want to congratulate you on your accomplishments. And so, yes, I know some of my fellow classmates were very quiet today, but I know that they're there and that they're taking it in. So I just want to say thank you again.
I appreciate it very much, Dejan. Thank you so much. I just want to say that with the information I gave or that I did share here today, don't regurgitate it, meditate on it. And if you have any more questions, you can feel free to send them to Dr. Bahosh. I'm available via phone or email, and I'll definitely get responses back to you all. Thank you so much for having me. You've been a wonderful class.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, guys. So our class continues. I hope that you find the session to be insightful. And it was important, Radawan, for us to have these opportunities, to have these forums, to really, get in contact, start to speak with these persons, let them get familiar with who you are, let them see your names, let them interact with you, right? Because these could be potential employers, not just for getting information and giving us the industry side of things. But as you see, these persons that we bring into our classroom, we bring into the university, they don't just share this wealth of knowledge and information, but they also are potential employers and persons that you could probably partner with. Maybe an angel investor. All right. So it's really important that, you attend these sessions and you make it your business, you make it your responsibility as a student to not just be in a safe place in a classroom and read PowerPoint slides or listen to videos, but to take each and every opportunity. Because normally, if you were to try to contact these people otherwise, you never get an opportunity to do that easily. But the university is offering you with a forum and a connection to do so. All right. So what I'd like to do at this point is, it was a lot to take in. Perhaps we can probably take a 5-minute break, right? Please do not disappear. What I have remaining for this session is we actually have a case to look at, and I also have your export grades to disseminate for the coursework. All right. Are there any questions before you go on break? All right, let me just check the chat. Okay, thanks, Jared. Thanks, Dejan, for that. Okay, well, if there aren't any questions at this very moment, let us take a 10-minute break, all right? Just go stretch your legs, get some water, and then we will reconvene. Let me just check the time just to make sure. At 6:23. Okay, guys, so I will meet you back at 6:23. Okay, it's 6:23. So could I get a number one for all who's on with us? I'm seeing only 5 participants, including myself. Thanks, Gerald. Dejon, thanks again. Okay, Redwan. Mark, are you here with us? All right. Okay, okay, guys. So I'm supposed to be sharing my screen now, so you'll be able to see now. Just to track back last week in terms of what we covered. We did had physical class. For those who attended, I realized that attendance in this class has been fluctuating dramatically, significantly, and yet everyone is asking about you know, the exams and all of that. But for you to be prepared for exams, you've got to be engaged with the course. All right. Now, I'm speaking to those who are actually always here. So for those of you who are listening to this recording, you will need to find a way to get yourself prepared, because there are a lot of things that we discussed and we did in class and in the online sessions that are going to be imperative for you. So anyhow, that goes without saying. So today we want to continue the conversation on export logistics. Now, we already looked at export logistics in a couple classes before. We looked at the 12 steps. We also looked at the trading companies and those involved in the actual transport logistics. Mr. Diptee did mention about insurance. We spoke about that. He mentioned about getting brokers on board. He spoke about, some of the certificates. Okay. He also mentioned some of the organizations and so on. And I know that we may have looked at this already, but just to go, let's just look at the Ministry of Trade website and Export TT, but we want to go to the Ministry of Trade and Industries. Homepage. Are you all seeing my screen? Because my screen is acting very weird on my end.
Yeah, I've seen your screen.
Okay, good. So let's just navigate, because navigate to see exactly what are some of the programs and services that they have for you as an upcoming entrepreneur. So we're seeing here flashing with us TT BizLink. So that is to get persons on the legal side of things, because Mr. Diptee did mention the importance of being registered. And for those of you, I know in our last class, we mentioned that the amnesty was supposed to up November the 14th, but as of today, I saw an extension. That extension has gone on to January the 31st. Now, yes, you might think that's a lot of time, but when you really check at December and how people tend to, lose focus and start to get involved in all of the Christmas activities and the New Year activities, so you find like a lot of these offices would not necessarily be open. You're gonna lose some days in terms of public holidays and that kind of thing. So I know you all had questions about it. If you have anything that you need to do to get done, now is the time to go get those things done. All right. Okay, so we are seeing here the Special Economic Zones Act 2022. So click here for more information. We're talking about manufacturing tax credit. We're just navigating the site to see what are some of the latest, what are some of the things they have for you as an upcoming entrepreneur interested in exporting. So let's just take it from the top end. Let's go to who we are and just see what they're saying. right? So they're I mean, we all know the Ministry of Trade, right? One of the frontline ministries within the government of Trinidad and Tobago that is leading the drive to position Trinidad and Tobago as a manufacturing base and as the business, trade, and financial hub of the Americas. Let's look at their priority sectors. So they have commercial, maritime, the creative industry, the leisure, marine, scrap metal industry, partial trade opportunities. Let's see what that has on it. There's a lot of information on this site. The more you scroll, the more you see, right? You're seeing here CARICOM Dominican Public Free Trade Agreement. There's the CARICOM Venezuela agreement. There's so many different agreements apart from you know, the CARICOM Free Trade Agreement. You have WTO. What you have here. So you have all of these here. All right. Right. So this is where we wanted to come. This is it. Small company status and status incentive. We have export booster initiative with international certification fund. Let's see what that is about. So the fund provides financial assistance to the manufacturing sector, including agro-processing, for a range of applicable international standards to boost production of the non-energy exports and contribute to import substitution. Funding will be provided in the forms of grants. So there is some sort of funding and grants for those who want to produce in the non-energy export sector, including agribusiness guys, right? The International Certification Program will provide grant funding to assist firms with building capacity in the conduct of standard audits, inspections, implementation of the process of certification, acquisition and operation of specialized equipment required for the adoption of standards. And let's see who is eligible. Sole traders, partnership companies. Once you're registered, of course, you have to demonstrate a potential to develop a sustainable export base. Firms establish a minimum of 1 year with supporting financials. So you have to have your financial statements. Firms engage in the production of non-energy export less than US 4 million. And you're also contributing to import substitution with sales turnover of less than 25 million. All right. Okay, so and we're seeing some examples of companies who received this certification and this grant. Habanero, Rockland, he mentioned Rockland today. SCL and Stewart Brothers. There's also a link to Export TT. You can get some more information. So this is an export booster initiative. There's also a research and development facility. We have Gateway to Trade. So I'm not going to go through every single one, but I just wanted to make sure that you can see this. And as Dejon is saying, he likes to do a lot of research to see what is out there. So for those of you who are interested in getting your hands and feet wet regarding export, I believe here there's a lot to unpack. In fact, I can set an entire exam based on this page. There's so much content I'm just seeing here. There's documents, media releases, there's speeches, there are publications, reports. There's a lot, guys. All right, there is a lot. And I do feel that this is definitely a resource, a golden resource for entrepreneurs to get freely, to just come and find out more. Now, I know we looked at the Export TT website in class already, but today, I'm not going to burden you with too much reading. We have a listening exercise, but a very important one. So today we are going to actually listen to a case, but the case it's a listening case, but it's a live case in terms of from the legal standpoint. We are going to hear about how to export to the US, to the United States of America. Now, this is, I think, about 45 minutes. I want you to listen to this entire video. And I will be asking you to take some notes about the key points that was discussed and to share with the class thereafter. What are the key takeaways? What are some of the products that are permissible? What are those that are actually enjoying free, what you call it? I forget the term right now, it escapes me. But there are incentives for certain products where there aren't any duties for when you're exporting to the US, that is. There's a list of products that enjoy that benefit. And I want you all to be mindful and to learn about these things. So we have a legal person who represented the Caribbean Basin Initiative. He's a lawyer. And the lecture is simple. It's long, but it's resource rich. And it's about learning how to export to the USA from a legal standpoint. All right, so I'm going to invite you now to listen to the video. I will be muting my mic, but I am here, and I want you all to take specific notes about what I just asked, what I just raised, right? What exactly is the Caribbean Basin Initiative? What are the key things that you must be mindful of when exporting to the US? What are some of the prohibited products and protected products and services? Well, products really is what he would have spoken about. What are some of the products where you are going to enjoy benefits that are duty-free, that you don't have to pay any duties to ensure that you get it across? We're going to learn about that here. This was selected as, specifically for this class in terms of how to export to the US. The US has a large market class, all right? And a lot of the Trinidad and Tobago taste and preferences, we sort of model and we sort of follow a lot of the American brands. As you can see, most of the American brands, they do well here. So the more Americanized we became as a country, you saw that our own products and our own services started to not just be too culture specific and too Caribbean specific, but it started to open up and started to broaden. And you find that it now appeals to the tastes and preferences of external markets as well. And because of the similarities and trends and patterns in terms of what we consume here as a market and as a people, you would now see similarities in some of what we produce and how it can actually be accepted in the United States. Now, the person who delivered this resource-rich, informative, step-by-step export lecture, I believe is from Haiti, but it's based on the Caribbean Basin Initiative. I don't know if you ever heard about the Caribbean Basin Initiative before, but if you have not heard about it, today is going to be your chance. So let me share my screen because my audio, because if I ask you to do it on your own, I would not be too certain that you all listen to the video. So this is going to be our case for this afternoon. Before we have a final class, which is next week, God's willing, okay? I am trying to share song. Hold on. Okay. Okay, skip. Please skip your-
All right. I think we're ready to get started. Thank you all for coming. This is going to be a great webinar. Please let me know if I'm talking too fast, and I'll try my best to slow down. But this is a subject I'm very passionate about, because international trade, it moves the world. I mean, goods from all over the world, most of the products in people's houses are from different places in the world, different countries. And international trade is what not only moves goods to individuals, but it also creates jobs. This is what builds countries. This can take a nation from being a developing nation to a developed nation. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We have people from the Bahamas. Good to see you all. We have people from all over the Caribbean, as well as UK, and some people from Africa as well. I see Kevin, I see you from Trinidad and Tobago. You have IUT in the house, Renee. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. We have people from all over. I see some people from the Bahamas. We have individuals from different nations. And as I mentioned, we are talking about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. It's a fantastic trade initiative, one that'll be transformative for everyone. And we're going to talk about that, and it's primarily talking about how to export your products to the U.S. And this piece of legislation is one that I want you all to be really familiar with, and we're going to talk about that today. So I guess before we begin, talk about who I am. My name is Jeremy Johnson. I am a U.S. practicing lawyer, focusing primarily on international trade law, as well as both federal and international government contracts, procurement contracts. And I've consulted with entrepreneurs across multiple continents. I've spoken in Europe, spoken in Africa, spoken in the US, spoken in many places around the world, and dealt with entrepreneurs all over the world. And so I have a variety of experience. I'm also the founder of Global Law Media, which is what you all are. It's my media company focused on educating the world on the law and offering legal education. And one of it is this international trade agreement that we have between the US and many of the Caribbean nations. So we're going to talk about some really good things. First, we're going to talk about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And it's a piece of legislation that is very important that I want you all to understand, because it directly impacts you all. We have people from all over, the British Virgin Islands. We have people from the Bahamas on this call. We have people from Grenada, Guyana, from IUT, Jamaica, everyone, people from all over the Caribbean have signed up for this webinar. So we're going to talk about this initiative. We're going to talk about some of the top products that you can export to the US. It's very important. Then we're going to talk about how to market your products in the US. Because one thing to understand the Caribbean Basin Initiative, and one thing to understand what type of products you have, but if you don't necessarily know how to market your products, how do you find buyers in the US? How do you find the distributors in the US? If you don't know how to do that, then it's all for nothing. So we're going to explain that in this webinar. Then we're also going to talk about the contractual and legal implications, because you're dealing with international trade. There are contracts involved. This Caribbean Basin Initiative is a piece of legislation. It's a law that's in place. So we're going to make sure you understand all of the contractual and legal implications. As well as we're going to talk about some of the funding opportunities that exist. Money is what moves this world, and we're going to talk about different ways that you can begin to find money and minimize your risk and make sure that you get paid. But before we get into the Caribbean Basin Initiative, let's talk about just the size of America. The US is the largest economy in the world. You look at the world economy. This is the world economy. The US is the largest economy. China is rapidly growing, but the US is still the dominant economy in the world. And this trade law, Caribbean Basin Initiative, allows you to export your products duty-free to the US. We're going to talk about what that means later on, but this is the size of America. This is the opportunity that presents itself for you all. If you look at this is Europe, there's Germany, France, UK, These are some of the African nations, the large African economies: South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, Australia. These are some of the larger South American nations. These are some of the larger Asian nations. And this is the rest of the world. The rest of the world is right here. So by being on this webinar, you've shown interest that you want to export to the largest economy in the world. And this is the opportunity that presents itself. And also from a logistics standpoint, it's relatively easy to get your goods to the United States, because if you look at this map, almost 2 out of every 3 people live within 100 miles of the border of the United States. And you can look at some of the largest cities are cities that are in the US, like Miami, Philadelphia, New York. These cities are right near the border of the United States. So getting your goods to these cities where almost 66% of the people live is relatively easy. You got New Orleans, Houston, Los Angeles, San Diego.
I just want to find out if you all are hearing the video.
Yeah, boss.
Okay, good. Okay, all right. So I'm sure you all realize how important it is, the topics of discussion, right? So I'm going to proceed. Thanks.
Chicago, Detroit, these are not everyone lives in a border, but the majority of Americans live relatively in this zone. You still have Atlanta, in places like Dallas, you have places like Las Vegas that are not within that zone, but it's still relatively easy to get your goods to these individuals. And let's talk about the current state of the US economy, because every state is not considered equal from an economic standpoint. For example, you have Texas, it's $1 trillion economy. So when you think about exporting your goods or finding buyers, you can choose some of the largest states, like New York is $1 trillion economy. California, $1 trillion economy. But even some of the smaller states like South Dakota, Nebraska, they're still relatively large economies, like $100 billion economy in this state, $129 billion in this state. So the American economy is enormous. It's enormous. Like is absolutely enormous. And let's talk about the growth of the American economy, because you want to be exporting your products to America. Let's talk about the future trends. Will the American economy be growing? Is there room for your products? And there is. If you look at what happened last year in 2020, during the global pandemic, you saw there was a drop in the goods. So there was a drop in items that were being exported to the United States. The economy failed, which has happened to many places in the world due to the global pandemic. But in 2021 and going forward, the economy is going to be growing. It's going to be in a surplus. So this is an opportunity for you all to really get involved. So let's talk about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. We talked about the economy of the U.S. Let's talk about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. And most of these countries are represented on this webinar. We have IET, we have Jamaica, the Bahamas, Guyana, Suriname, Barbados. I mean, there's many of them. Belize. All of these countries qualify for the Caribbean Basin Initiative. We have Trinidad and Tobago, and many other countries such as this. So we're going to be focusing on primarily these countries that generally surround the Caribbean Sea. This area is the Caribbean Sea, and countries that generally touch the Caribbean Sea or close to the Caribbean Sea are what people generally call the Caribbean. So these are the countries we're going to be focusing on. So let's talk about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. Now, Caribbean Basin Initiative is unlike most other trade agreements. Most trade agreements, when you're dealing with things such as the African Growth Opportunity Act, which is a similar preferential trade agreement as the Caribbean Basin Initiative, it's just one piece of legislation. But the African Growth Opportunity Act is just one law for all of Africa. Or you're dealing with the free trade agreements, you're dealing with the U.S. Canada-Mexico Act. That free trade agreement is one piece of legislation. But with the Caribbean Basin Initiative, it's a collection of trade agreements. And together, they are called the Caribbean Basin Initiative. That's very important to understand. It's not one law that you have to focus on. There's a collection of laws that together combine to create the Caribbean Basin Initiative. I hope I explained that well enough. So let's go to the timeline of the development, because it's like I said, they're all of these together create the Caribbean Basin Initiative. So it's important to understand that America has always wanted to maintain a strong relationship with Caribbean countries. They always had a vested interest in maintaining our strong relationship. Why? Because the proximity of many of the nations to the U.S., as well as there's a large West Indian population, the large West Indian Caribbean diaspora is living in the United States. Many of you all may have relatives that live in the United States. So the United States has always wanted to maintain a close relationship with the Caribbean nations. For example, the first one that started is in 1983 with the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Act. I'm going to explain all of these, but right now I just want you to see the timeline of it. And then in 1990, they created the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Expansion Act. And these are just laws or regulations that allow different products to access the market, the U.S. market, duty free. And then in 2000, they had the Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act. And that was expanded in 2002. And then they started focusing on some laws directly for Haiti. They had the Haitian Hemispheric Opportunity through Partnership Encouragement Act. And then in 2010, they had the Haiti Economic Lift Program. And then, which is very important, last year in 2020, they extended this Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership. They extended it to 2030. So the relationship has been ongoing even before 1983. The United States always tried to have a good relationship with many Caribbean nations. And this one has been extended to 2030. So the idea is that you can export your products to America duty free. So we'll be talking about all of these different Caribbean trade agreements: the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Expansion, the Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act, the Sugar Import Program, which is not often talked about, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the programs for Haiti. They're also going to talk about the General System of Preferences. All of these are very, very important trade acts and trade laws. So let's talk about the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Expansion Act. What it primarily is a preferential trade agreement, and it allows thousands of products to be imported into the United States duty-free. Now, what does duty-free mean? Duty-free primarily means normally when you're exporting products to a different country, you have to pay a duty tax. And that duty tax can range from whatever product it may be. It can range from 2% up to potentially 20%. It just really just depends. But with this, it doesn't give a trade agreement. It doesn't give a duty import tax. So let's say, for example, you have $1 million worth of products that you're going to export to the United States, and that's a 10% duty tariff rate. That's roughly $100,000 that you have to pay just to import your products to the United States. But since products from the Caribbean nations are duty free, that 10% duty tax doesn't have to be paid. That's $100,000 that you can keep in your pocket, or you can pass on to the consumer, and your products can be cheaper in America compared to other countries that are exporting the same exact thing. So if countries are importing or exporting the same things as you are, your products can potentially be cheaper and be more competitive in the United States, which is the largest economy in the world, by making certain that you follow the rules of the Caribbean Basin Initiative. This is very, very important. This is very important. I cannot stress that enough. This is very important. But there are some exclusions. We're going to address some of these exclusions later on. There's thousands of products that can be imported to the United States. So there's thousands of products, literally thousands. But under this trade agreement, it excludes textile products. And we're going to discuss these later, because later trade agreements that were created later on address many of these. It prevents watches and watch parts, sugar, and things such as that. So to address that, they passed the Caribbean Basin Trade Partnership Act, and that allows textile items, footwear. So this one banned textile, but this one allows textile. So this is important to understand the intricacies of the Caribbean Basin Initiative, because it's not like most other trade agreements. The Caribbean Basin Initiative is a collection of trade agreements that together create what they call the Caribbean Basin Initiative. It allows leather goods. It allows tuna. Like this one banned tuna, but now tuna is allowed. But it's only for 8 Caribbean nations. So this one is for 17 Caribbean nations. This is for the vast majority of Caribbean nations, but this only allows for 8 Caribbean nations. So it's very important to understand the goods you're trying to export to the United States and does a good from your country qualify for that? And as I mentioned, the sugar import program, it allows 7 Caribbean countries to import sugar to the U.S. at a low tariff rate. Now, this isn't a duty-free one, but it's a low tariff rate. It's on a first come, first served basis. So if you're able to export, if you're dealing with sugar, I know the Caribbeans, they have a lot of sugar. They're known for the sugar cane. They're known for the sugar, and you can import that to the United States at a low tariff rate on a first come, first served basis. Excuse me. And then with that in place, once that quota is met, it'll go up to the normal tariff rate. So this is very important to understand. Now we're going to talk about how to find buyers and how to market your products in the United States. But first, I want to make sure we understand the Caribbean Basin Initiative. This is vital information. And then we have the programs for Haiti. America has a really strong interest in ensuring that Haiti has some economic development, because it allows through the Haitian Hemisphere opportunity through partnership encouragement. They allow duty-free access for garments. Because at first, as you see right here, they didn't allow textile, they didn't allow garments, and things like that. But they allowing things for Haiti. Because Haiti right now, in many ways, it is definitely the hub of apparel, certainly for the Americas. And if things go right, and if there's more development, it can definitely be the apparel hub, one of the clothing hubs of the world. Because through this Caribbean Basin Initiative, it allows them to also partner and do direct shipment from the Dominican Republic. For example, right now, the Hanes company, the undergarment company, the big company Hanes, most of us are familiar with them. They do exactly this. They make some of the products in Dominican Republic, and then they complete it in Haiti, and then they export it to America duty-free. And these are the things that you all can do. It's also important to know that when you combine the Caribbean Basin Initiative with the general system of preferences, that's also allowed duty-free treatment for over 119 developing nations, including basically every Caribbean nation. So when you combine the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which is duty-free access to America, with the general system of preferences, which is also duty-free access to America, I mean, we're literally talking about thousands of products that can be exported to the U.S. duty-free, making your products cheaper than products from other countries. So this is important, that we want you all to take advantage of this and be able to put this information into action and be able to explore it and be able to pass it on to other individuals. So let's talk about just there was a lot of information, but let's just summarize the benefits of the Caribbean Basin Initiative. One, as I mentioned, is duty-free access to the U.S. for thousands of products, except for the sugar import program. That's a low tariff rate, but everything else is duty-free. But it's important to understand that 35% of the value of the products must originate from that Caribbean nation. Say, for example, you're exporting something from Jamaica to the U.S. and it's under the Caribbean Basin Initiative. Only 35% of that value of that product has to have been created or originated in Jamaica. That's a very low margin compared to, as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Mexico Canada Act. There's some things that have to have 75% origin. In order to get free access, duty-free access to America under this agreement, you have to have some product like cars have to have 75% value must have been created within either U.S., Mexico, or Canada. They lowering it to 35% for the Caribbean nations, Guyana, Trinidad, Tobago. I mean, whatever product it is, you can import things from other countries, and there's only 35% of the value of that product has to originate from the Caribbean nation. So it's a very low threshold. And as I mentioned, you can export your products to the U.S., which is the largest economy in the world. And the thing about America is that, as many of you know, English is the primary language spoken in America. So you really don't have to worry about translating your products into different languages. For example, you export to the EU, you'll have to worry about German, you have to worry about French, you have to worry about English, many other languages. Africa, different languages. Asia, there's many different languages, but the world's largest economy, there's only one language you have to worry about, and that's English. So that's a benefit of this Caribbean Basin Initiative. So let's talk about just the basic elements. As I mentioned earlier, when you're exporting your product, the country of export must be from the Caribbean Basin Initiative. You have to be eligible from that particular country. And the product must be Caribbean Basin Initiative eligible. Then it must be imported directly into the U.S. from your country. You can't send it to China and then from China they import it to the U.S. It has to come directly from your country. It can't come from Cuba. You can't send it to Cuba and then from Cuba to the United States. It has to come directly from your Caribbean nation. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the rules of origin must be met. And these are all the Caribbean nations that qualify under the Caribbean Basin Economic Recovery Expansion. And pretty much everyone, all 27 countries are represented on this in this webinar. And we have Barbados, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, the Cayman Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, Haiti, Panama, Jamaica. There's many of these countries, St. Kitts and Nevis, many countries. And then with the CVTPA, only 8 countries qualify: Barbados, Belize, Curacao, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago. And as I mentioned, this allows textile footwear, leather, travel goods, and watches to have duty-free access. And there's thousands of products now, literally thousands. But if you want to focus on,
I just want to pause here for a second. Guys, are you hearing me? Just checking to make sure you're here. Just click 1.
Yeah, Miss Emmy.
Okay. All right. So you all know in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a lot of those crafts that utilizing, especially those leather goods. Now you see sometimes when you walking on alongside Stobie, all these areas, you see all those sandals being created. I believe they use a special leather. Anybody knows? Is it leather that they use, those sandals and bags and all of that? And you find that the persons, like a lot of the tourists and so on, when they come to Trinidad and Tobago, they would enjoy and they would purchase and they would patronize these local craftsmen and these, shoemakers and all of those sandals and the different baskets, all of those things that they make. But look at what we just learned here. Under this agreement, even though they said that textile was prohibited, in the other agreement, because there were about 4, CBTPA, textile and footwear is indeed allowed, duty-free to export to the US. I want you to really think about that. Think about that, right? How many of those leather sandals that those vendors, somebody who has an export mind can take that to the US market, because we already know that these persons have a taste and a preference for it, because when they come into the country, it's they who buy it as opposed to the Trinidad and Tobago population. All right, so I just wanted to pause to have you think about that. There might be so many other product ideas that you can now open up your mind to, because he did say there were thousands of products that qualified. Thousands. All right, so let me just proceed. I hope that you find it very engaging so far, very interesting, very information rich, especially for you who are thinking about your future careers. And what could you do? What could you export?
want to focus on these, you have to be a part of these 8 countries. And also for the sugar export program, you want to export sugar to the United States, it's typically one of these 7 countries. So if you are from Haiti and Jamaica, you're pretty much in Haiti, Jamaica, Belize, and Barbados, you pretty much qualify for everything. And Trinidad, Tobago, you qualify for all of these, So you're very fortunate to be from these countries. And it allows importation of sugar to the US at a low tariff rate. And then once that quota is met, once that level is met, then it goes to a normal tariff rate. This is a sample commercial invoice. So we talked about the Caribbean Basin Initiative. That was a thorough run through of what the Caribbean Basin Initiative is. So let's talk about a sample commercial invoice. This is a sample commercial invoice. You don't have to write anything down. I didn't mention that earlier, but you don't have to write anything down. I will email these slides to you. I'll also send you the recording of this video.
Well, you would need to write things down, because this is a recording, right? This is a YouTube video, so we are not going to get the slides. And it would be best if you try to take down your notes now instead of having to listen to the video all over again.
So you don't have to write anything down. I promise I will do that for you. But this is a sample commercial invoice. This is something that you all should be familiar with. When you're doing business internationally, you'll be coming in contact with sales contracts and commercial invoice. I'm gonna talk.
And Jadal said he saw a lot of these in his line of work.
About the sales contract later, but this is a sample commercial invoice. And it talks about who the seller is. What they describe the products that are being sold. What currency are you all using? The terms of the payment, 30 days, 90 days, is it immediate? The invoice number. I mean, things such as that. I mean, you get a place for you to sign, things such as that. This is a sample commercial invoice, and I'll send this out to you all. Also, certificate of origin. This is very important because this is for Caribbean countries. If you're not from a Caribbean country, you do not qualify under the Caribbean Basin Initiative. So when you're exporting your products, you have to fill out this form, a certificate of origin, basically saying who the exporter, the producer, describing your goods. This is what you'll send when you ship your goods, and it goes to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which is a part of the Department of Homeland Security. Because if you don't fill this out, they may fine you, they may seize your goods, it may make you forfeit your goods. Now, if this happens, you can contact me and I can help you out. This is what I do. One of the things I do as an international trade lawyer, I can help people with their goods that have been confiscated by the Customs and Border Protection. So this is another form you have to fill out. So now let's talk about some of the products now. If you understand the Caribbean Basin Initiative, you understand there are thousands of products. I mean, there's literally thousands of products. Most of the products you can think of, you can export to the U.S. But let's focus on, let's choose 3 products we want to export. I mean, it can be anything, I mean, any products. So come up with 3, this is a worksheet I have, and I'll send this out to you all. Also choose potentially 3 industries that you want to focus on. You want to focus on food, you want to focus on cosmetics, I mean, you want to focus on, I mean, it goes on and on and on, you know. Choose 3 industries you want to focus on. And also some metrics I want you all to understand. Like, do you have an export plan? It's very important. We're going to talk about an export plan later on. But do you have an export plan? So that's I know people often talk about business plans, but do you have an export plan? Have you drafted a sales contract or commercial invoice? Do you have that? These are some things to get the wheels turning. These are some things that can help you make certain that you are prepared to export to the United States. Because America in many ways is a very sophisticated economy. It's a very sophisticated economy. So you have to make sure that you are prepared for that. And also, does your product require an export license? Oftentimes we talk about America, but does the product coming from your country require an export license? For example, you are from Guyana. If you want to export a product to the United States, your country, which is how every country works, certain products require export license. So let's talk about some top products to export under the Caribbean Basin Initiative. These are just some ideas for products. There's thousands of products now, but these are just some ideas. One is clothing and apparel, as we mentioned. Certain countries can qualify for that. But when you're dealing with clothing and apparel, it's important to understand that there's a third country fabric rule. The yarn, the cotton, the fabric has to come from a U.S. country. So you have to get the fabric from the U.S., put it together in your home country, then export it back to America. That's what Hanes does. That's one of the many examples. The Hanes, they import the cotton and the fabric from the U.S., build it in a factory they do a little bit in Dominican Republic, but they do a lot of it in Haiti, and then they export it back to the United States duty-free. Also foods, superfoods. Irish sea moss is on the rise in the U.S. It is a booming industry. Irish sea moss is big in the United States. Also soursop. These are things that can only grow in the Caribbean. You have things like pineapple, hibiscus. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Coffee. You have Blue Mountain coffee from Jamaica. There's other countries that make coffee as well. And your things can be exported to the U.S. The Blue Mountain coffee in the United States is very expensive. It's considered one of the best coffees in the world. So there's a premium attached to Jamaican blue coffee. And there's coffee, as I mentioned, coffee from other countries. There's also cocoa, mangoes, and there's also gluten-free things such as cassava. There's many things that grow in the Caribbean countries that do not grow in America. You can export those things to America. But it's important to do market research. I have a link for market research. but there are major players. When you're dealing with fruit, there are big, large companies that are already in fruit in the United States. So do your market research before you start exporting things. Do your market research to make certain that you don't have enormous, large companies that you have to compete with. But you can do your research and figure out, okay, there are major players maybe in pineapples with certain companies like Dole, but there's not really many in soursop or Irish moss or whatever it may be. Also, fish and seafood, fish, lobster, shrimp, crab, tuna. These things are in abundance in the Caribbean waters, and these things can be exported to the United States.
And I actually see again locally a lot of the sea moss brands being sold. They're even unbranded, and you could go to the farmers market, not to the farmers market, the Sundays market, and you see a lot of persons who would produce their own sea moss and they would have it there for sale. There's a lot of other things. You would see things like ruku, I believe it's ruku they call it. Anybody knows about the ruku product that they put in stews?
Yes.
Right? It's things that it's not going to be common, if you will, but they have promise. Soursop, look at those superfoods, right? Okay, let's just continue. Sorry about that, but I'm just so excited about this information-rich lecture because it can really give you guys some ideas, right?
Also, this is very important. It's one thing to just export things in their raw form, you know. Let's focus on adding value to our products. Instead of doing Irish sea moss and just exporting the Irish sea moss as it exists, let's maybe turn into Irish sea moss gel products. Let's convert it to actually like a cosmetic product, maybe like a product you can ingest or something like that. You can take down, or instead of doing coconut, can we export coconut oil or mango butter, or instead of doing the coffee beans, let's see, can we roast it and then export it from the U.S. in a roasted final form? Can we ground the coffee? Can we do it so you can put it in a French press? Instead of just shipping the coffee bean, the coffee fruit, let's roast it. Let's add value to our product, because if you add value to it, you can charge and make more money off of it. Versus if you export it in its raw form, you can make pretty good money, but you can make more money if you export it. Instead of doing just the cocoa fruit, you can do cocoa fertilizer or type of cosmetic. And as I mentioned, with the combination of the Caribbean Basin Initiative and the general system of preferences, there are thousands of products you can think of that will get duty-free access to America and allow you to make money in the largest economy in the world. This is very, very important. This is the opportunity. And this website right here, like I said, you don't have to write it down. I'll send it out to you. This is a really good place to do market research. It covers imports from over 200 countries to the U.S. It shows you the trends. So if you don't have any idea what product you want to export to the United States, you can see certain products that are being exported to the United States from your particular country. And you can either do that, or you can add value and convert it into a final product and export it to the United States. So this is a really good website to go to be able to do market research. So it's important to understand where to find buyers. We talked about the Caribbean Basin Initiative thoroughly. We've talked about many things. We talked about different products, top products to export to the US. Then where do you go to find buyers? If you have all the information, but you can't find a buyer, you still haven't really made any money. You can't create jobs for other people in your country. So where do you go to find buyers? We're gonna talk about that right now. The first, a really good place is trade shows. There are many trade shows in America. If you're dealing with clothing and apparel, the Magic Trade Show it's one of the best trade shows to go to in the world. I mean, some of the biggest brands, clothing brands, are at the Magic Trade Show. It's in Las Vegas typically every year, so you can go there. Also, if you're dealing with a food product, the Fancy Food Show, it's really the de facto food trade show that you all can meet. I mean, dreams are made at these trade shows. I mean, like Ben and Jerry, they launched their brand at the Fancy Food Show. Individuals there's many other brands that I think Vitamin Water launched their brand at the Fancy Food Show. So like these are places to go. Also, the International Beauty Show in the US. mean, these places you can go and connect with buyers, you can connect with distributors, you can connect with food brokers. You can find people that will be at these trade shows. They can look at your product and then they'll buy it and they'll make orders for it. This is where dreams can be made. Dreams can come true at these places, and it historically has, and it has in the past. Why can't your products be one of those products? And one way to do this, you can get a B1 visa from the US. You can go to your local US embassy or your local US consulate and you do a B1 visa and tell them that you want to go to the trade show. You have to show them, you have to come prepared now. You have to show them that you have a real company. You have to show them that that you have a real product you want to export. You can't just say I want a B1 visa. You have to go through some work and be legitimate. Like I have booked my flights and things such as that, you know? So as I mentioned, you can connect with buyers, distributors, and food brokers. You know, you can connect with these individuals. And before you go, you can see who will be there. So you can be more prepared and take advantage of it more, but you'll know who will be there. And when you're talking to these buyers and distributors and food brokers, they're going to want to know two things. They're going to want to know, why should they add your product and why should they source it from your company? You have to answer those questions. Why should I add your product? And then I'm adding your product, but why should I buy it from your company versus another company? Can you answer those questions? Now, there's many things you can say. There are many things you can do. We're going to talk about some of that later on, but many things you can say. You can say my product is low in fat, or my product is all natural. My product is organic. There's many things you can talk about. Like you can say this food item has less than 5% of the daily value of the recommended food intake. So these are actually beneficial for you, because America is a fairly health conscious country. So those are some things you can talk about, and you can say many more. You know, so you say this is helping. This is a cooperative in my country, and this is helping hundreds of women find employment. Also, lawyers and accountants. You talk to lawyers and accountants. Lawyers and accountants, they know buyers, they know distributors. They can help you, let you know whether your product will be able to be successful in the U.S. And also the internet stores. This is very important. Amazon is the online retailer in America. It is by far the largest online retailer in the US. And there's also Etsy as well. But Amazon even became more popular during the pandemic because individuals had to be in their homes. They were just ordering, instead of going to the grocery store, they were ordering from Amazon. And what's important to know about Amazon, they have a fulfillment by Amazon, the FBA. This is very, very, very important. And the idea is that you can send your products to Amazon. You can be in your home country. You can be in Haiti. You can be in Jamaica. You can ship your product to Amazon, their headquarters, their storage facilities. And then Amazon would, and you go on Amazon.com and create your online store. And when someone buys from your store, instead of you shipping it from your country and it taking 10, 15, 20 days, or however long it's going to take to get to your customer, Amazon will ship it on your behalf. They will distribute it from their facilities, and they'll guarantee a 2-day shipping.
Okay. I will have to now pause the video. I'm going to now ask some questions, because there's no way that we could actually view the entire thing in this class, in this one session. But I do encourage you to please view it when you get some time after class. You don't have to do all tonight. I know that you might be tired, but sometimes you might be in traffic. Put on your headphones. You can fast forward the video up to from 33 minutes onwards. Listen to another 10 minutes. Take your notes. This is information rich. This is really an opportunity here. You don't get these things from, not even from the lectures. Are we talking about these things? We are bringing the information to you through these mediums. All right? All right. So I'm going to now press escape. I'm going to engage the class a bit. So what can you tell me about the US market? Why export to the US?
We say export to the US because it's a fairly large market, and it has a lot of opportunities, and shipping your goods over there and finding success.
Very good, Jado. So one of the key things that was mentioned was the size of the market. Yes, the US economy being one of the largest economy in the world. And then when we speak about proximity, we're seeing that it's fairly close to the Caribbean, which can facilitate a direct form of trade. Any other benefit that was mentioned?
Ms. Sola, I mean, once you're starting to talk about the US, you're talking about foreign exchange. Additionally, there are a lot of different products that we can export to the US that is tax-free, doesn't have any tariff for us in the Caribbean.
And would you say that that is something that you guys knew about, or you just learned that?
It's definitely something I learned today.
Did it open up your eyes?
Yep.
Yeah. Plus thousands of products that you could actually export to the US for free, duty free, once it's under the Caribbean Basin Initiative, right? There were a few products that were excluded, and then there were different agreements, but Trinidad and Tobago happened to be in all of those that allowed some of the excluded products like the textiles, the garments, the footwear, the tuna, that kind of thing. One of the other benefits was the fact that he mentioned, you know, even if you were to chase other large nations, if you look at the European nation, the European Union, you still have to battle with the language barrier. Not everybody speaks English there. But in the United States, it's largely English, right? Primarily English. You find that there are trillion-dollar economies. He mentioned Texas, New York, California, notwithstanding that there were others that were in the billion-dollar economy. So that's still good, right? Another benefit, guys, that he mentioned, it had to do with the percentage. I want to see who remembers that. Who remember the percentage point of origination? How much of, what percentage of the product must be originated from the Caribbean or from the actual exporting country?
I think he said 75, miss. I'm not sure.
He did mention 75, but that's not the answer. So for countries like other countries like Canada and other places in the world, they need to have 75% of their goods. Good try, Jadal. You were listening, right? Originated from that particular country. So that means that, you know, most of the putting together, the sourcing, everything, the majority of that has to be done there. But we have a lot of slack. Anybody want to take a wild guess then? I haven't heard Mark's voice for the evening.
Yeah, Miss Sammy.
You want to take a wild guess? Just take a wild guess. You could never tell.
Miss, I really not sure this one, man.
Just take a wild guess. Just take a wild guess. What percentage of the product must be originated from the exporting country?
10-15%.
Okay, thanks for your guess. So actually, Mark is closer than Jadal. But not correct. So it's 35%. That's the answer. So you're good. I mean, and that's, I mean, wouldn't you say that's reasonable? They're not forcing you to say that, okay, 75% or 100% of your product must originate from Trinidad. That's 35%. Just 35%. So let's say you're outsourcing many other things, right? And you're just using, let's say, the CMOS or what, I don't know, whatever it is that you decide to sell. Just 35% must originate from here. That's not asking too much. Now, I don't know from the time that video was posted to now how much of that may have changed, but I don't think that it would change significantly. Okay. All right. So another question for you guys. What are some of the interesting products that you could actually hit the ground running with if you were to export to the US?
Leather shoes.
But
Okay.
I believe preservatives in a sense. So like taking the CMOS, making CMOS gel, coconut oil, and so forth.
Yes. Right. Mango butter. Although I never heard about this mango butter. Anybody knows what's mango butter? I haven't heard about that one.
Sure.
But he mentioned that. Okay. And anything that's value added. So even if you sell the raw coconuts, you sell the raw CMOS itself, but you decide to turn that, as Dejan is saying, into a processed good, it's going to attract greater revenue. Very good, guys. Where do you find buyers? Where could you find buyers? We have identified the market. We have identified the country. How could you find the actual buyers? People who's going to buy a product from Trinidad.
Find your buyers by doing market research.
Yes, so that is a general thing. But there was something specific, right? He gave us actionable steps, things, places to go, people to meet, where to find your buyers. It was the last thing that he spoke about.
So I believe we was talking about like the Magic Trade Show and different the other part where he was talking about, and he mentioned acquiring a B1 visa.
Yes,
Probably.
that is correct. So we could actually, I don't know if you're all seeing my screen because that's where I paused it. So you're seeing trade shows. You need to attend those trade shows. So there's a big one that happens in Las Vegas every year. That's the Magic Trade Show. That is really for garments and stuff. But if you are into the food sector, you definitely want to go fancy food show. He mentioned that very successful businesses started by finding buyers there. So he mentioned Ben and Jerry's, for example, right? The vitamin water. Other products basically got their breakthrough. He spoke about breakthrough, finding your breakthroughs by just attending. So if you could save up your money, you have a good product, you know you have a good product, these are just two examples of trade shows. But the answer is trade shows, going to the trade shows, because the actual customers, the buyers, the distributors, the brokers, that's where they are. That's where you can meet them. Of course, you will have to be able to explain why your product, which is what he mentioned, and why your company, right? And that's where you talk about what are the benefits. That's where you talk about what is your innovation. That's where you could also pull the Caribbean trump card, right? Because there are persons who are looking for that culture-rich, indigenous type good a product, right? Lawyers and accountants have networks. And then you can also pull internet contacts through internet stores, Amazon, for example, right? How many countries are eligible under the Caribbean Basin Initiative?
This is it, 27 countries, I think.
That is a good answer. Yes. 27 countries. Right? Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Panama, you name it. Okay? Anyone wants to, therefore, my final question anyone wants to take a try and define or explain what is meant by the Caribbean Basin Initiative? What do they understand by the Caribbean Basin Initiative?
I think it's to give Haitians duty-free access to garments or something like that.
Okay, so
Basically,
thanks for your efforts.
yeah.
Thanks for your efforts, but not quite. Anyone else want to take a try? Because that's what this entire lecture was about. It was the Caribbean Basin Initiative, right? Just like in exams, when you get a case study and we're going to ask you about the case study, you now have to be able to, in this instance, you listen to it and we're asking you questions. In the exam, you'll have to read the case study and you'll have to answer questions. So you have to know how to extract what you're extracting. Okay?
Miss, I sort of look at it or get a similar reaction to it like Export TT. So it basically, I believe, is an initiative to guide exporters primarily in the Caribbean to export into the US and how to do that efficiently, all the steps as he going through here. So that's why I see the Caribbean Basin Initiative as.
All right. Well, good try, but not quite as yet. So let me just give you in layman's terms in very easy language. If we were not able to extract what he said precisely, but thanks so much for your contributions. I just want you to think about the Caribbean Basin Initiative as a trade agreement. In 2 words, it is a trade agreement. It's a trade agreement between, I'm sure you could answer me now, between whom? This trade agreement is between whom?
Caribbean nations and the US.
Exactly, precisely. Yes? So it's agreement, an agreement to trade. Yes? And what is that agreement? That agreement is, well, the United States of America has a vested interest in the Caribbean, right? Due to their large diaspora, West Indians, they're living in the US. Of course, they themselves have a large economy and they are looking for unique products and services. They want to have a relationship with the Caribbean. So they formed this agreement, and the agreement simply says, listen, if you are in the Caribbean, you can export your goods to us. And we're going to offer you no duties, duty-free, right? So that's one of the perks of the agreement. The fact that you can export those specific products once you are from those 27 countries and not pay any duty and tap into their market. Now, we actually import a lot. We import a lot of, we do, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they benefit, when you all those brands that you all are wearing, and we go to the United States and we purchase all those sneakers and all of those retail stores, and they're selling handbags and you name it. We are importing, we are bringing it into our country to sell. But just like how we are doing that, they want our products too. And there are thousands of the products, right? So it's simply an agreement made that establishes the relationship between the Caribbean and the United States, where under that specific initiative, you are able to export and not pay any duties, especially for the products that are allowed, which are many. Of course, he showed you some forms. There was a commercial invoice, there was a certificate of origin, and you realize the certificate of origin had to be the one specific to the Caribbean Basin Initiative. Otherwise, if you're not under that, or you're not trading under that agreement, you will not enjoy the benefits. So there is some specific form that you have to use. And he also mentioned that without the form, your goods could get confiscated. You could actually be fined. Your goods could be seized. Right? You may have to forfeit it. And well, of course, there was a little bit of PR there. Yeah, so that's what it is. It's not an export TT type arrangement because they are not about developing anybody and training them and finding out if they're export ready. No. It's just an agreement set in space, set in place to allow for the, I wouldn't say free trade, but trade of goods to the US without any duties. That's what it is. And that's a benefit to both the US and the Caribbean. Yes? So are there any questions on this? What you all can do is you can forward this video to your colleagues, to your family members, to anybody who's interested as well. Because again, you're not gonna hear this. You're not getting this information, not even if you're going to Export TT's website. Okay? The way how we broke it down and how he continues to break it down when you listen to the rest of it, there's lots more to be gleaned. And I will be asking you questions in our final class next week, God's willing, for the export class. Now, I know we are going to wrap up soon in about a couple of minutes. Thank you, Dejan. Thank you for everyone for your engagement with our guest speaker. He did send his regards via WhatsApp, and he did let me know that if you all had any questions, to please let him know as well. Okay, so he can be reached through me. And we look forward to maintaining some sort of relationship with our stakeholders. So that is that. Now I want to also just mention something really quickly, which is next week Tuesday, because I was a bit disappointed that some students still did not turn out to the export class today, even though I said it was mandatory. Right? So for whatever reason, I hope to hear, I'd love to hear what was the reason. Some students dropped out. So I just want to congratulate and thank you, Dejan, Jadel, Mark, Rodawan, for coming and staying. I know, Mark, you probably joined us a little bit later, right? But yeah, this is the second to last class. You all just have one more class to go. But for the next class, which is the marketing class, because everybody here is in that marketing class. Again, that class is going to be mandatory next week because there is the Global Entrepreneurship Week Forum, which I will send you the link, and I'm saying it again. And I'm asking you all to prepare questions to engage the audience. Majesty was assigned to do the vote of thanks. Okay? All right. So when you're listening to this recorded, just please be reminded by that. Okay, guys. So what next? Anything I'm forgetting?
Yeah, Miss, I think you said something about the coursework
Yes.
exam grades.
Very good. Yes. So do you all want to know what you all got?
Yeah, Mr. I would like to
About
see.
Okay. I don't know how to do it. Maybe I could just put you all into breakout rooms and just jump in and tell you. Okay? So that I don't share your mark to everyone. So let me just try to do that really quick. Let me stop share. And let me go into the breakout rooms. Wherever is that? Just now, I'm looking for breakout rooms. So long I haven't used that feature. Where is it?
Miss, you get
Anybody?
show the marks instead of going through that.
Yeah, Miss,
Like,
I don't think anybody have a problem. Well, I don't know who have a problem with it.
You also next thing you all did terrible.
okay, I mean, you have the name next to the mark.
Look, I found the breakout rooms. Don't worry.
Oh,
One, two, three, four. Okay, so you can go ahead and join the room. Where is everybody? Where is the break? I just was with Mark. I'm seeing Jadel.
I just left the breakout room there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll just do you now. Give me your ID number.
It's 816-021611.
02 816 02
1611.
Yes. Okay. All right. So you got 32.
32 out of 40.
Yes.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Miss.
So I hope you're happy.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good marks. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So congratulations on passing your coursework. And you can now leave the class and I will jump to the other students. Okay. So thanks, Jadel.
All right, thank you.